First up on the panel for discussion is the wonderful Nikki Kish. Nikki is a CSPA rigger. You guys, if you know her from our drop zone, she came into the Mad Rush last year and stepped in to help with packing. So many of you guys are familiar with her from here. And yeah, I'm really excited that she wanted to share about equipment. And Nikki, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I am going to leave the presentation now over to you.
All right. Hola, Sky fam. How you doing? Yay. Okay, cool. I'm really excited. I've actually, I don't know if I've even ever been on a Zoom call, so this is really cool. Thanks for including me in our little safety day chat today. I could talk about equipment like for days, so I'm going to try to keep it to the 15 minutes. So I'll just jump right into it. So first off, you want to make sure that you know your equipment. You want to take care of your equipment, kind of like your life depends on it almost, right? So a couple questions when you're getting in your equipment, you want to make sure you're asking yourself, does it fit you the way it's supposed to? So does it need to be adjusted? We have student gear that can all be adjusted. If you're not sure if it fits you properly, ask a coach, jump master, a rigger. They can all answer your questions. You want your leg straps to fit nice. You want that hip ring right at your hips. You want to make sure that your main lift web is proper. You don't want it too long in the body. If you're ever curious about how to line that up, you want to get a measuring tape. You want to go from your collarbone down to your hip bone. That's going to give you your main lift web measurement. One thing you really want to make sure of is your yoke size as well. Like, where is it sitting on your shoulders? I've seen people be in rigs that are too big for them, especially females and smaller frame people. It's very common. You're going to get something too big. And then if you're doing more dynamic flight, that can become a risk. It's going to slide off your shoulders. You definitely don't want to do that. And you like track right out of your rig. I don't know if that's ever happened, but we don't want it to. Is it appropriate for the canopies you're flying? So do your canopies fit in there properly? Does it have canopies in there that are appropriate for your wing loading? So are you a new jumper and you borrow somebody's and it's got a 170 reserve and you've only ever flown a 210? Probably not appropriate for you. You want to make sure it's safe. Also appropriate canopies for your flying style. If you're doing a bunch of like crew or something like that, you don't want to have a fully elliptical swoop canopy in there. Also does the container fit your flying style? We've got like our student rigs at SVI maybe aren't the best for free flying. So if you're a student moving into free flying, you want to find something that's going to be safe when air is rushing at it from all angles. And now there's so many different styles now. You can even get different containers that are suited more towards wingsuiting or swooping, stuff like that. So you can really get specialized. Also, are you familiar with it? Have you jumped it before? Is it your own rig? If it's your own, you want to know all the details about it. If you're borrowing it from someone else, you have a few questions you need to ask. Again, all the fit things, does it fit you properly? Know what your pilot chute PUD is like. Is it just a hacky? Can you just grab it and go? I've seen people borrow rigs from friends, go up in the plane. They do their emergency procedures, they're checking their handles, checking their PUD, but then they go to pull in the actual jump and they don't realize it's a free fly PUD and you have to actually peel and pull instead of just pull it right out. So that's something you want to make sure you're familiar with. You want to make sure you know if it has an RSL or not, because that's going to drastically change any of your emergency procedures. You also want to know about the AAD in there. Is it just a regular one? Does it have settings? Does it have the swoop setting, wingsuit setting, or is it on a regular setting? That's going to change all the altitudes that it activates and detonates. And then also, especially with SVI, you want to make sure that your offset on there is proper, that your landing altitude and your takeoff altitude are programmed into the AAD properly. And then we go into the other stuff you're wearing. So is your jumpsuit appropriate for the jump as well? Are you trying to do flips and you're wearing booties? Don't do that. You know, wear a suit that fits you well. If you're trying to get drag, you know, you want something a little bit more baggy. You're trying to go fast, you want something a little bit more tight fitting. You want to think about the helmet you're wearing. Make sure you know how you react with an open face versus closed face. I know I can't breathe with an open face on, so I like a closed face. But I'm always going to make sure that I've practiced and I know how to open it once my canopy is open. So I'm not fumbling around with that and distracting myself from my jump. All right, so now there's a really good list. I'm going to go through all the packing points here really quick. There's a great list that's provided on CSPA that I suggest everybody look at and get familiar with again. I know we all know how to pack, most of us. I'm not familiar with everybody on here, but you've seen the procedure of packing, and once you get your A, you have to be able to pack at that point. So I'll just run through those. No, that's the end. So we're always making sure our parachutes are packed to the manufacturer's requirements. All the manufacturers are different. There's different closing sequences of the main. There is different routing of the bridle, different pin position, that kind of stuff. So you always want to check your manuals. And then obviously running your lines, they're straight, no twists, no flip throughs, that kind of stuff. Everything's centered, everything's running up evenly. We don't have any of, sorry, I only have one hand, but things aren't offset, things are nice and even. Your brakes are stowed properly, making sure that you're pulling your steering line through your guide ring before you put your toggle through your cat's eye. That's going to keep your keepers intact. If you do it the other way, it could rip your keepers off. Your slider's all the way up against the stocks. It's quartered. It's nice and seated in there. That'll give you a nice opening. The line stows, when you're packing, you want to make sure that they're the proper length. Your stow bands are the correct size. So there's a whole bunch of different sizes of the elastics. There's like the tandem ones that are really thick. The regular ones that are thinner, they're both like that. But then there's also mini ones. You don't want to mix and match. Usually you want to keep with the same ones. If you haven't opened your container in a long time, I can definitely suggest that you need to repack that before you jump. You're actually supposed to repack it every 180 days. You don't just go out after a season and jump. I've seen this year, actually, a lot of rubber bands are getting melted to the grommets. So that's going to cause a bit of a mess if you don't take care of that before your first jump. You want to make sure that there's enough line between your risers and your bag when you're putting it in the container. If it's too short, it could get hung up or not open properly. If it's too long, come up in a big mess. It could get flipped around or something like that. You want to check the closing loop, make sure it's the proper length and that it's in good condition. There's always one more jump in that loop. No, just kidding. If it starts to fray, make sure you're switching that out. We usually have a stock of them sitting around, so very easy to do. And there should be a washer at the end of the closing loop, before the knot, so it doesn't pop through. And then you want to always be checking the condition of your pilot chute, the bridle as well. Make sure it's routed correctly. Again, check your manufacturer's instructions. Usually they come over from the top right down to the pin, and then back down to the bottom right. But there are quite a few containers, like our student containers, and the vectors. Actually, manufacturer says that they should be coming out the bottom right, up to the pin, back down the bottom right. Both ways typically work, but if you want to do things 100% proper, you want to make sure that you're following your manual, and also that your pilot chute is folded properly and all your bridle is stowed properly. So then we're going over to the maintenance of the container and some gear checks there. So this is stuff that your rigger will do every single time they repack your reserve. If you want to be able to do it yourself, any rigger will give you the time to go through and show you all the points of things you should be checking, because you should be keeping an eye on this all the time. Don't just leave it up to them. So you're checking that there's no broken or frayed stitching in the fabric, or any of the webbing, anything like that. I don't know if any of you saw, was it a Friday freakout where he had a really hard opening and the whole container came off of the harness? So he was in the harness still, he was safe, but one little corner of a stitch that's broken, that's starting to go, you have one hard pull, and like crazy stuff like that could happen. So you always want to make sure you're looking at that. No rips or tears in the pilot chute. Oh, I skipped down, sorry. All the Velcro's in good condition, especially in your handles, that your handles won't just pop out and start flopping around while you're jumping. You've got your release cables in your cutaway handle, and then also the cable for your ripcord. You want to make sure those are in good condition and that they're cleaned. When we do the repacks, we do clean them and we put a coating of silicone on them as well, so they come out easy. We check the condition, make sure that they're not like chipped or anything like that. You want to check your BOC, so your pilot chute pouch. You want to make sure it's the stitching in that on the top of the elastic tends to break a lot. So make sure that that's intact, because if it gets, again, too sloppy, your pocket's going to open up, air can get in there, and your pilot chute can slide out really easily. Also on the sides, right where it's attached is a stress point as well. So that's very easy to start a rip. So once it starts, you want to do something about it. Also, when you're like packing your gear and moving it around, never grab it from that pocket to move it. Always grab it from a harness or a point like that. You're going to look at your 3-ring, make sure that's in good condition. You don't want any corrosion on there. You don't want it dirty. Check that you have all your keepers. So your keepers are your little elastic bits that go over your pieces of webbing to stow that excess after you've closed it, loops around. So the biggest thing about the safety aspect of that isn't necessarily how it fits or how it functions, but it's just gonna like slap you the whole time. So that could be distracting. You don't want that to happen. Then you're also looking at your RSL, making sure it's in good condition, the little snap shackle that's on it, make sure it releases the way it's supposed to, and that it's actually fully closed when you're jumping. All right, so then you want to make sure you're doing main parachute checks as well. Your rigger might not always do a main parachute check as a part of the repack. So make sure if you want that done, you're requesting it specifically. Usually they're going to ask you, hopefully. This, again, the main parachute is the jumper's responsibility. It's not actually regulated, or it doesn't really fall under the scope of what a rigger is responsible for. So you are 100% responsible for your main. Make sure that you're keeping an eye on it. Again, ask a rigger. We can go over all the different points with you and show you how to inspect your main. So you're looking at your pilot chute handle. Is it secure? Is it about to rip off? Is it wearing the side like where the stitching is beside the nylon, about to rip off. We don't want that. Is it the right material and the right size? There's a whole bunch of different sizes of pilot chutes. So you want to make sure it's appropriate for the canopy that you're flying. You don't want any rips or tears in there, obviously. So you want to check that your closing pin is secure on the bridle. You're going to go over all of the material, make sure there's no rips or tears, broken stitching, anything like that. No broken stitching or damage to the lines. Typically, you want to get your steering lines replaced before you do a full reline. Check your grommets. All your slider grommets are good, not worn. And the slider material is in good shape, all of that. Connectors, your slinks, if you're using soft links or hard links, make sure they're attached properly and not wearing. And then also the steering, make sure your toggles are on properly. I just did a repack for somebody who just bought brand new, or not new to them gear, and the toggles were put on backwards. So make sure your toggles are put on properly and that they're looped through the right way as well. There is a wrong way to do it. If it has Velcro, anything like that, make sure it's all in good condition. All right, so I had the 1 or 2 minute call here, so I'll speed up this last little bit. I just want to touch on a few points on respect for the packing area and other packers, other jumpers, of course. So if you're respecting your gear, it's going to be safer for you. It also increases the value of it. If you're ever planning on reselling it, the better you take care of it every day, every time you pack it, every time you jump it, the more value and the longer life it's going to have. So once you hit the ground, you're going to make sure you're walking towards your canopy while you're bundling all the lines and all of that. You want to daisy chain it so your lines don't get all crazy. As you're walking with it and going back to the packing area, you want to make sure all your materials off the ground, so your canopy and also the D-bag, all of that. Be cautious when walking, especially in our area. There's a lot of those little like thorns on the ground, and those can very easily snag your canopy, so don't do that. If you're landing in the student field, you're going to be in and out of the van with it, so make sure you're cautious going in and out. It's not getting snagged on doors, that kind of thing. Once you're in the packing area, pack right away. If you're not going to pack right away, put it in a bin, put it off to the side. Don't just sprawl it out and take up all the real estate there. If you're using a packer, you want to approach them cautiously with your parachute and ask them what they would like you to do with it. So if they've got a bunch on the ground already, they might want you to put it in the bin. They might want you to lay it out. Every packer is different. Some like it when you do all the toggles and all that kind of thing. Some want to do it themselves. They're going to double check it anyway. Never leave them in the sun. For those of you that help with our tandems, thank you so much. That's so great. But on those really hot days when the sun is blazing, we have to make sure that we're there right away picking them up. We don't want that canopy and the container laying in the sun. So we got to get out there, get them back inside. There should be no food or drinks on the mat as well. And if you do have something like drinks, make sure it's just in a closed container. So if it gets knocked over, it's not going to be spilling anywhere. So you just make sure it's a closed container. Don't mess around with other people's stuff. Don't just like grab it and move it if it's in your way. Make sure you're asking their permission to do anything. It's not your gear, even if you know they're out talking with somebody and you want to pack your parachute, make sure you just respect everybody else's gear. Be cautious of where you're stepping. You're not walking on lines, nylon, anything like that. And then you're gonna put it away after. Again, don't just leave it in the middle of the mat. You want to put it off to the side, something like that. And if you've taken elastics off, you should clean those up as well. And any packer is gonna give you big old eyes and smiles if you sweep the area and clean it up a bit. So yeah, I think that's it for equipment. Thanks for listening to me ramble on. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Nikki. I know. So equipment is really tough because there's so much to cover, and it's very, I mean, it's like anything in our sport. So just respectful of the fact that I've asked these wonderful people to like take what could be a 4-hour classroom session and smush it all into 15 minutes, in some cases 10. So Nikki, thank you so much.